Hello, Exiles. It's Groundhog's Day, and by Groundhog's Day, I mean it is another new Poe League, and somehow, despite all of the nerfs, Detonate Dead of Chain Reaction is here. Why? I'm not sure. I guess they thought that, no, I shouldn't say that. The nerf to the gem, specifically how the flat damage was severely affected, is more or less impacting Archmage builds. This build actually just cares about the corpse scaling. So it didn't affect us that much, and in fact I have prepared a little video to kind of both showcase the build, but also show how resilient it is to the nerf in question. My strategy is to run a Maze of the Minotaur map, as is the norm when you're doing this sort of showcase, with a level 1 Detonate Dead of Chain Reaction. And just to kind of obtain like maximum consistency, I'm going to go back to Act 1 and buy an under-leveled Unearth, because technically I am very, well, not very, but well geared enough to have a level 25 one with a bunch of quality on it, and I kind of want to get a little closer to like an earlier start setup. So now it's level 17. This should suck. Just as like a heads up, this should be terribly, terribly bad. But this is vastly less DPS than we would have with the build after everything. Oh look, it's fine. That's incredible. Definitely like a little bit clunk. But yeah, no, it's it clears. I will say I probably need to put my MTX back on. Get my actual Desecrate going. Yeah, this is where you see the pain a little bit, but even so, considering how under-geared, under-leveled everything is, this is downright silly that it still works this well with a level 1 skill gem. Much better. The only kind of pay to win I'll ever endorse is getting this MTX, because the sound is much less jarring to deal with. I should have left that shrine there. I shouldn't be picking up buffs while I'm doing this. Alright, this should be painful. It is very tempting to pop that that breach. So this is how low the DPS actually is right now. Do a little bit of stepping. Keep the mana from looking too silly. Now, if I had level 20 Unearth, he'd have died already. Very important, our single target is most affected by Unearth being down leveled. Ooh. Oh, don't stand in that. This is why I run 2 mana flasks, actually, is if a fight goes long, it's one of the best things you can do. I'm standing in so many falling rocks, it's actually kind of absurd. But we got there, baby.
That stretches the sanity.
It's that easy. Okay. So with a level 1 Detonate Dead of Chain Reaction and a level 17 0 quality Unearth. Well, I mean, granted, it's got some quality from Enhanced, but otherwise, level 17 Unearth. And there you have it. It clears well. And admittedly, the boss was painful, but the DPS from the changes I made is going to be so much worse than like what is actually in the patch notes. It is comical. It is properly comical how big the change is. For starters, Detonate Dead of Chain reactions corpse explosion value scales with gem level. So even here where I have it down simmed, it isn't genuine to how much strong it should be, because the corpse explosion value, I believe at level 1 is like 4%, and at level 21 with some gem levels from a corrupted helmet, it's like 5.1. 5.1%, or even 5.2 if you have the right corruptions. 5.2% is so much more than 4. That is like over 25% more damage. And that's not even to talk about what was done to Unearth. Unearth, normally, in this current setup at least, there's a slightly better setup down here, has level 80 corpses. The gem level I brought it down to with the gear there was level 13, giving us level 17 corpses for level 63 corpses. A level 63 corpse has like, it is a huge difference. And it still does as well as it does. It actually kind of shocked me that it was able to kill Minotaur at all. I thought I was going to get to Minotaur and it would be a brick wall, but no, it just took a little while. But of course, you know, you got to see the survivability of the build in play there as well, so that was nice for the showcase. Let's talk about how it works and why the build is strong. We're going to start with the gear, and each piece of gear I'll explain why it is the way it is. First, we have our weapon. In a perfect world, you have this on an Oscillating Scepter. Oscillating Scepter gives us Elemental Overload. Elemental Overload saves us points on the tree. It's that simple. If you don't have Elemental Overload, that's fine. I have alternative skill trees here to kind of show you what you're dealing with until you have that. You want to get +1 all physical spell skill gems with minion damage. So you do a craft, Fracturing optional, Recombinator optional, obviously all different ways to kind of make this happen. You want to isolate those two mods together, so if you can get them both with an open suffix, you can craft prefixes cannot be changed, and Scour, and then go for a multi-mod and get the Trigger Craft and Cast Speed. Cast Speed isn't that important, it's actually the Trigger mod that's most important. These days, you get that from Refinery. It's like in kind of a hidden area in the zone during the campaign. It's an Act 9, very easy, and very important, because this activates our final Ascendancy node over here, which is Mistress of Sacrifice. Now we have a offering on Trigger. It is naturally up all the time, constantly proccing Flammability, constantly proccing Wave of Conviction, and then later that will be a different curse. But most importantly, it is constantly proccing Bone Offering. And Bone Offering gives us a tremendous amount of block. Enter the Shield, which we want to get, a good spell block value on, mostly. You also want to get reduced extra damage taken from critical strikes, if possible, and then just whatever good stats you can get alongside it. The base does need to have armor on it to get the reduced extra damage from critical strikes. It needs to have energy shield to get the block spell damage, so I think it needs that to have block spell damage. They might have changed that. Point is, you want those two mods specifically, and that all is part of getting your block chance capped. And capped block chance is the holy grail of mapping survivability. Let's just be perfectly honest. We have a lot of investment on the tree going towards this as well. We have things like the Shield Master giving us block. We have these nodes giving us block. They also give us +1 all max res. They're also very efficient, right? They give us attack and spell generally combined. They give us more resistance fixing to kind of ease up pressure on the gear. These do the same, but for spell block. And when everything comes together, you generally get to block cap very easily. Currently, there's 2 points floating, and this isn't by accident. There are a lot of ways to get those last 2 points. You can use tattoos, which are still in the game, very nice. You could get the, you could get a block prefix, I believe, on your shield, which would actually make this very, very easy and maybe even free up points elsewhere in the tree. And generally speaking, you can get offering effect on your body armor. Next item, no surprise, is Kitava's Thirst. If possible, get one with a nice little corruption on it. This one has +2 socket level of fire gems. I said that wrong, whatever. In a perfect world, you get like +4 with fire and AoE, and that pumps up your Detonate Dead of Chaining a little bit more. Generally speaking, though, these corruptions are not important. Do not hyper invest in a +4 helmet. Please don't. It's not worth it. That is a very, very late optimization. It does not do that much. It's good, don't get me wrong. It's worth going for, but it's like way down the line. You want like much better empowers and enhances and stuff, and it's actually, generally speaking, very expensive to go for that helmet, so don't get baited into that. Now, the other nice thing about this helmet is that it gives armor and energy shield, which is important for our body armor. Our body armor has no life mods and as much armor and energy shield on it as physically possible. This is an older example. You can see the Gravicius mod on there, that's legacy now. Generally speaking, the Determination aura effect gets nixed in favor of a Eldritch implicit that does what the Gravicius mod did, and the Gravicius mod you now want to be like just reduced physical damage, right? Kind of like a I believe that resultant body armor is actually better than this current one, also, just as a heads up. That's a pretty hard body armor to get, but you don't need a perfect body armor right away, obviously. You're just trying to get that very good armor ES value with some valuable resistances and no life mods. And the reason we do that is because we have this mastery here, which gives us life for not having life on our body armor, and this mastery here, which gives us a tremendous amount more armor and energy shield by doubling the benefit of our body armor. This comes with some caveats though, kind of moving on to our gloves. These gloves are really nice. Probably one of the more exciting pieces of equipment I have on this character. These give a lot of damage. I believe, just doing the math real quick, it's something like 83% damage. That's really good. But before you have these, you want Aetherwind gloves or Nexus gloves, whichever version of the ritual base you can get. And the interesting thing about these gloves that I'm talking about is that they are energy shield. That does not work with our armor mastery. So in order to fix that, you're kind of put into a corner where you either have to use an essence of dread to force an armor mod on it, which works, or just craft armor on, right? Have an open prefix. However you want to get it done, that is at your discretion, but keep that in mind. These early Aetherwind mods, or sorry, Aetherwind Ritual, Leyline, whatever. 3 different glove bases that do the same thing. But they have this reduced maximum mana, which is actually beneficial towards maintaining our mana, but also more importantly, a chance to regain mana when you pay a cost skill. And early on, that's very important because our amulet is a much more difficult piece of equipment to get optimized. You want +1 level of all physical skill gems, which is kind of a premium mod on its own, but you want it with an essence mod, Essence of Insanity to be specific. This gives us recover 10% of mana when you use a skill. It is identical to the Mana Mastery, which we also take. And it is identical to the Clarity Watcher's Eye mod, which we also would like long term. If you are on Soul Self-Found, you're probably not getting this Watcher's Eye, right? With that Clarity mod. Maybe you are, right? If you're just looking for that one mod. In a perfect world, you also get the Determination mod for crit fixing until you can fix that another way. Crit fixing is very important on the build. I talked about that with the shield, but you need these 3 things together are like your Thanos Gauntlet Infinity Stones, right? They make your mana feel good, even though you are spending thousands every second. And they do that by like circumventing the concept of regen altogether, although we do have quite a bit of regen too. Most of that comes from Essence Glutton. Essence Glutton on this build is effectively 2% of mana regenerated every second when you consume a corpse. And we're always consuming corpses. Bone Offering is consuming corpses. Detonate Dead is consuming corpses. Our character might be consuming corpses. I don't know. They're pretty weird. It also gives us things like energy shield regen and some flat mana regen, which is also, I mean, these are all just like very nice things to make the build go. And it's generally speaking the first ascendancy we take, because by taking this at level 50, we can go for Kitava's Thirst right away. It also, early on in mapping, kind of fixes all of your survivability issues with Mind Over... early in campaign, it fixes your survivability issues by bringing Mind Over Matter online and making it so that you never have to worry about mana, which is its own benefit. Eventually that changes, obviously, because you start eating all of your mana. Now, the boots are actually a very simple piece of equipment. You don't have to worry about this a lot. You can get Bone Offering effect, which is effectively block chance. That's pretty cool to have on boots. But generally speaking, you just want to meet that armor and energy shield requirement. So Legion boots base, as an example. You want to get movement speed, duh, and all the good stats you can. In this case, I have some strength fixing on it. I have lightning res, life regen, which is perfectly viable, life, armor, and energy shield. But the most important stat is the one I haven't talked about yet, and that's that little 5% increased cooldown recovery rate. For some reason, some sort of server client relationship techno mumbo jumbo between how your game talks to the Path of Exile server, you don't get your full potential 10 casts a second out of Kitava's Thirst, unless you have a tiny bit of cooldown recovery rate. That makes the difference and generally makes the build feel a lot stronger. You don't need this for, honestly, a while, but you do need it ultimately, or you're going to find situations where the build just doesn't spin up as smoothly. That's probably the best way to put it. Your build will not spin up quite as smoothly. It'll take longer to get to that like maximum cast speed value. The rings, again, very simple equipment. What you generally want is your good resistances to fix your stuff, a life roll, an open prefix to craft more damage taken recouped as mana. This very quickly turns situations where enemies are smacking you into situations where your mana actually can't run out. This is because all of the damage is going to your, or most of the damage is going to your life. but all of the damage is contributing to the mana recoup. And that relationship with recoup, if you're splitting the damage among multiple sources, creates situations where it double dips. So it's double dipping off of the life, and then your life is also double dipping off of your energy shield and your mana, and all of that is happening in kind of circularly. And the way that kind of ends up working is with the values here, right? If you get all of these nodes on the tree like you're supposed to, go ahead and grab this mastery as well just to make it a little more efficient. You effectively have complete recoup to all of the damage you're taking. Do not sleep on that. This is such an important part of the defensive layer. When people come to me saying the build doesn't feel like it survives very well, almost always it comes down to they don't have enough recoup. And I think one of the reasons this happens is because people try to invest in damage and make the build punch harder. This is something I don't think I've ever said in a build guide that I really should. The most important damage nodes on the entire tree early on are right here. It's just this. You get these fire nodes, and you get this node here, which gives you another 100% increased damage with hits against ignited enemies. This is tremendous. It is so much damage on its own, right? You're going to get some from your weapon and whatnot. Don't worry about damage after that, all right? You're going to get some here, you're going to get some here, you're going to get some stuff here, but focus on your defenses once you have this. You should not need any more for quite a while, as long as you're updating your gear and whatnot. Belt, again, is pretty simple. Stygian Vice has the best overall stat line, and we want good stats. You want strength on it because you have to... The more strength you have, the better, because it's kind of expensive to get the optimal body armor. And then, of course, you know, life resistance, whatever you need on your Abyssal Jewel as well. Important to note, these stats are, like, okay, but, I haven't... This build's example gear is a little dated, right? I kind of talked about that with having a Legacy Gravicius mod. Saint's Hauberk is not the top body armor anymore in this slot. This goes much higher than it used to, so I should probably do an update on that. In fact, I will. Yeah, I'm gonna do that. 1 second. Okay. Well, that just juiced the build quite a bit. This is like a proper modern body armor because the bases have been updated since then. This is not perfect, but it is rather ideal. But I mean, you know, it's simulated gear just to show you how good things can be. That punched our armor up, like, I don't know, 4,000 points. Our effective hit pool went up a whole bunch. That can also happen with the gloves and the boots, obviously. A lot of this equipment is a bit dated, unfortunately, because I haven't I haven't pushed the build super hard in a minute. It is a bit dated because this is still kind of adapted from an older version, at least the guide is. I think I have a more modern character, but I don't remember when I played it, and I might have deleted it because it was from like a temp, one of the temp settlers, and I just didn't keep it. So that was a mistake on my part. So already, that's a very large improvement to the build. Our energy shield especially just, like, exploded. Lastly, I believe I talked about the jewels a little bit. Watcher's Eye, if you can get one, the Clarity mod is most important. After that, it is anything you want. I personally, early on at least, will try to fix my, like, reduced extra damage taken from critical strikes. Those two mods together, generally speaking, have never been terribly expensive for me. I think that's like a 1 or 2 div investment. If you're in Soul Self-Found, getting either or both is probably kind of difficult. Sorry, I don't make the game. It is what it is. But if you can get your, say, crit fixing from somewhere else, you can get some much better determination mods on this to pump your survivability up even more. Things like just flat armor or physical damage reduction would go a massive distance towards pushing this build to a place where even the scarier content no longer kills you, like, at all. On a general rare jewel, you want things like life, you want things like resistance, and you want to understand the damage values that actually matter for the build. I actually have this written down here. The Corpse Explosion component. Spell damage does not work. You want fire damage, elemental damage, area damage, and minion damage because of spiritual aid. And unfortunately, in this particular example, I have cast speed with fire skills. Unearth is not a fire skill, so this actually doesn't apply, but the other stats are nice, and it's not a terribly competitive slot. The last jewel is the Light of Meaning. This very specifically goes in the North Witch node. Anytime you have a very dense cluster of passive selected around one of the the primary class jewel slots, that's usually a very good place for Light of Meaning. In this case, we have a fire damage one. As you can see, it's contributing to about 12% DPS because it's giving us like 108% fire damage, which is a lot of flat damage for, you know, more or less 1 skill point. So, real quick, we'll go into a bit of a tangent on how the build actually, you know, levels, because you do have to get to level 50. The system I use is pretty simple. You can actually kind of do anything you want. The, what is it? The start tree here, as long as you're adhering to this and it functions, that's great. And pretty much everything functions adhering to this as long as it is a fire skill. So if you want to do rolling magma until then, that's fine. I do recommend, though, sticking to the corpse stuff just because it's pretty good. It's pretty good with not terribly high investment. So personally, I will strap, LMP to Unearth. Eventually you'll get Desecrate and you can have Spell Cascade on that. And I'll just use Volatile Dead. Having that alongside Detonate Dead leveling gets you set up to switch over when you eventually do your early setup in the helmet, which has Volatile Dead and Detonate Dead together. This is before you get the Transfigured Gem, because we can't really plan around having that right away. Of course, low-level links included. Your key concerns, though, very early on, are Unearth, some sort of additional projectiles, Detonate Dead, Volatile Dead. You want those 4 things. I guess Desecrate as well, right? And then Spell Cascade, kind of? Yeah, Spell Cascade, we'll say. Those gems you can get generally as quest rewards. There's some things you want to get alongside them as well that will cost currency, but those are the things you want that are kind of your go and keep going well early on, especially the corpse stuff. I know that's a lot of people probably are like, well, isn't the point of this build not to play a 2-button build? Sometimes you gotta do the hard thing to get the better thing, This build is Magikarp until it's Gyarados. Well, that's really not fair. The build is actually very effective as it's in its 2-button stage before you switch over. But when you do switch over, it's off to the races. However long you had left to finish mapping is now 1% as long, because you're effectively on a 6-link at that point. Let's talk about skills. For starters, one of our little tricks for pumping up the general DPS for the build in single target situations is a Desecrate brand, right? A Desecrate attached to Arcanist brand. Desecrate at level 20, or more appropriately, you would probably try to get it to level 21. This does level 81 corpses maximum. It's kind of limited by the area, but because these corpses are more generic, oftentimes they are superior to our Unearth corpses, but also, generally speaking, we can actually consume more corpses than we produce with Unearth, so this can be beneficial to your DPS in other ways as well. In our weapon, we want our general triggers. Currently, it's simulating Wave of Conviction. Eventually this goes away because we get Awakened Fire Pen, which will give us fire exposure on hit. Awakened Fire Pen is also why technically, that and Combustion is why technically the +2 Fire Gems corruption on the helmet is better than the AoE one. Although either one is fine, it's mostly the effect on Detonate Dead that you care about. Last support currently is Cruelty in this setup. I believe Hypothermia is technically a little better, but you need enough dexterity for that to actually be the case. And the reason why Hypothermia works is because enemies around us are naturally chilled thanks to our ascendancy. That's this node here, I believe. Nope, it's Corpse Pact. Enemies near corpses you spawned recently are chilled and shocked. We are always spawning corpses recently, so they're always chilled and shocked. And then Plaguebringer here, just because I haven't gone over this. It gives us a bunch of AoE, it makes us do more damage, it makes enemies deal reduced damage. 10 out of 10 node. Here we have a little bit of fixing going, but let's talk about this one first. So we have shield charge and faster attacks. You could run Frostblink, right? The transfigured version where it has a cast speed instead of a cooldown. We get enough cast speed for that. It's probably even better. I'm just an old man about it, so I have shield charge hooked up to faster attacks. And then I have Eternal Blessing hooked up to Determination. I love Eternal Blessing. It gives a ton of aura effect. You combine that with your determination, you get a lot of armor. A lot of armor. That's kind of a big part of what makes this build go. It's like a very efficient way to add a defensive layer. But then we also have Clarity. And the way Clarity works is we have a very low level one, and we hook it up to Arrogance. Because if an aura reserves life, Eternal Blessing will not block it. You can actually combine those two things. It's one of my favorite interactions in the game, and just something I always like to highlight because if you don't know it, you should learn it. As you can see, currently our effective hit pool is not boosted by things like Val Molten Shell or regular Molten Shell. These do have an effect. They are very useful. Things like wading into legions or fighting King Harbinger, some of the situations in the game where your defenses can be tested all at once. Very good thing to have on hand. And of course, I always have a Flame Dash on the character, especially one like this. And then I have a Flame Dash as well. Flame Dash is good. Again, something you could probably cut if you're running the Frostblink, which is probably an optimization at this point, but again, old man brain. And then lastly, and most importantly, we have Unearth. This is Unearth in the endgame. Before the endgame, it's a 4-link. You don't actually need a lot. You have Archmage, you have GMP, Arcane Surge, just because you're spending all that mana. This is kind of a general explanation for how your Unearth is going to look when you're bringing the build online around level 50. Before you have Detonate Dead of Chaining, there's also a setup here for how you want to do your damage. You have a regular Detonate Dead with a regular Volatile Dead. You're actually triggering both. And that's in your helmet to trigger and just blow up the screen. The Volatile Dead is very nice in the campaign because you don't need quite the damage you do in mapping, and the balls will just go out and seek out everything, and you generally never have to stop. You will always be over-leveled, and you'll probably be flush with currency just because that's what happens when everything dies around you instead of, half the enemies surviving as you run to the next zone. Late game Unearth is an entirely different beast. It is a proper 6-link that goes under body armor that is doing everything in its power to be cost-effective, make as many corpses as possible, still cost at least 100 mana, and then also make very big corpses. To this end, empower and enhance together. Obviously, this is a bit of a cost incentive, or this is a bit of a cost barrier. You do not need the 6-link setup to finish your Watchstones, or sorry, Void Stones, whatever they're called now. Those two things, no problem. 4-link setup does it just fine. This though is going to push things to a much more comfortable place for single target. This is like when you want to farm pinnacles at max level, like after the quest. Empower gives bonus levels, enhance gives bonus quality. Levels make the corpse level higher, quality gives increased maximum life to the corpses. Combine the two of these, you're in a very happy place. This isn't actually as expensive as it looks, especially if you're on trade, because you can just buy corrupted versions of level 3s, people trying to hit 4. They missed, now they sell the gem for cheaper, and that makes this a lot more palatable. But on top of that, you also need a 6-link. You probably don't need to worry about this too much, unless you're pushing the build to like a more long-term thing, which, to be fair, if you want this build to farm like all endgame very well, and you need to raise like a lot of money, it's probably worth it to invest in this before you really knuckle down and start farming. The super endgame version, we already talked about the weapon a little bit. You move to elemental weakness, you change your anoints around, now you have Whispers of Doom. Before Whispers of Doom, generally we're using our anoint to cover our critical hit deficit, and we take Sanctum of Thought. This gives us reduced extra damage taken from critical strikes. If you have just that and the shield mod, it's like 90% potentially, and that covers it almost all on its own. Even on the lower end, it's like 70 to 80%. So that's more than enough for general red mapping. But long term, obviously having elemental weakness on top of flammability is going to really just kind of add a layer of damage scaling to your build that you can't get elsewhere, especially considering we're elemental overload based. It's hard to fit crit into this. I haven't figured out how yet. By this point, we kind of are switching over to hypothermia. It's a slightly better damage bonus than cruelty, but harder to fit because of stats. If you can get the gem level up all the way, it's actually much better. I think it's from 24% to like 29%, which is not like a tremendously massive bonus or anything, but it's big enough to be excited about. Of course, Combustion and Awakened Fire Pen stick around. Awakened Fire Pen is our source of fire exposure. We're hitting so often that 10% is plenty, and then Combustion is really hard to beat, unfortunately. There just aren't a lot of supports that give us damage in a way that's universal, but Combustion does give flat % more fire damage, which is one of the ones that obviously works, and it gives another negative fire resistance buff. This might actually be swappable once you have the double curse setup and everything, but generally speaking, you don't want to remove this because this is where our ignite chance comes from, and it brings that mastery for 100% damage with hits online. So this is better than it looks, even though it already looks kind of okay. And lastly, our Giga Unearth has level 82 corpses. If you can manage to get another +2 gems, which would be very expensive, but is doable, you actually hit the corpse cap of level 86. And at that point, the build probably does all content except for pinnacle bosses just fine. That's extreme investment though, right? I don't know that it's worth it to take it up to that point just to like be able to farm T17s. It can do it, right? If you're like, I want one build and I want it to be fun. Well, this build casts while casting, and it casts very fast, and it's very quick and fluid, and it's very durable in most situations. I think the only thing that actually scares this build are really, really big slams, like the super advertised stuff. Everything else it handles just fine. As a final note, a little going away present, we have pretty much everything that's talked about in the video here and then some, talking about what you want to do with your gear, why we make the decisions we do, how everything synergizes, what you're looking for, and what you're trying to avoid, I guess, as well. There's just lots of little notes in here, things that I've learned over the years of making this guide. A lot of frequently asked questions are answered generally in their respective question. There's little tidbits about what to do for various points in the leveling process. If you go down to the tree, you can see we have all sorts of different skill trees set up that kind of show you what you're doing from point to point. You have like a starting tree, which is very bare bones, but shows you what you're doing before you even activate Kitava's Thirst. As you can see, a little bit of mind over matter, elemental overload, a bunch of damage, believe it or not. Some basic stuff. This is like right as you're about to swap, and then this is kind of when you're swapping, when you start mapping, and so on and so forth. There's also some advice on what you want to be doing in early maps and what things you need to be prioritizing. Very specifically, you want to take your ascendancies in the order of Essence Glutton, Plaguebringer, Corpse Pact, and then Mistress of Sacrifice, and you want Mistress of Sacrifice from your Uber Lab before you go into red maps. This is what pushes your block online, even if you don't have very much investment. This alone with a shield is generally a very, very large amount of survivability that will keep you alive and allow you to alch and go very comfortably. There's a whole big section on gearing concerns to kind of cover everything that I've already talked about. There's a going forward section that talks about some of the last upgrades that can be done that aren't even simulated in the POB because they're a little bit, I'd say, unrealistic. If you're a very high level player who like loves to push builds and min-max them completely, these are things that you're concerned about. And there's also some notes about Mercenaries of Trarthus and how we don't know how A, a Trarthan gem might affect things, or B, infamous mods might affect things. If there's a Trarthan gem that affects the way Unearth works in a way that makes the corpses better, this build might be way stronger than I'm giving it credit for. That's a big if, though. That's a very big if. They haven't really done anything to suggest that will be the case. I would love if that was the case. Like, if that happens, I might not even switch away from this build anymore. I might be all in on it at that point. And lastly, just a little note, because I always seem to forget to bring this up. Our gods are Brine King, because freeze and chill fixing, and then Gruthkul for... Oh, not Gruthkul. Garokhan for shock fixing. You can make some swaps with the current setup to get, like, I believe these 3 nodes in particular, which will actually give you complete chill effect reduction and complete shock effect reduction. And also +1 all max res. So that's something to consider. A lot of the points, even in this endgame example tree, can be swapped around if you fix them elsewhere. And that has happened every time I've played. My endgame tree has been a little bit different. So this is something to keep in mind. There's a lot of flexibility in the build that way. There's also things like getting sovereignty for the 1% all max res mastery. That might come up since you are reserving a little bit of life already through clarity. You might maybe find recoup sources from elsewhere that will make it so you don't need either these nodes or these nodes. You know, in some combination, you can path the tree a little bit more efficiently because of that, which allows you to go, yeah, like I said, pick up this, pick up this. You could potentially come over here, get the armor mastery, which would also give you more max res. You can actually get the max res on this pretty high with like some very diligent min-maxing. I think 83, 84% is not absurd, but you're probably going to have to give up some damage on the quest for that. That might be what the league in the current game calls for, though, so keep that in mind as well. Otherwise, this is my 3rd take. I have been recording for like 2 hours, trying to get it a little more organized each time. If you have any questions, ask in the comments below. I will be checking the video daily until the league goes live, and then I will probably be streaming league start. 2nd day of league, I have a prior engagement, right? Grandma's 98th birthday, girl grandma. I gotta go visit her, so I'm gonna be gone all of Saturday, which sucks. Day after league start, I gotta be gone all Saturday. For good reason, though. And then, yeah, I think I hate making this promise, because I feel like every time I make this promise, I'm like jinxing myself, but I actually really want to do a lot of streaming this league. I'm kind of really looking forward to playing a lot of Path of Exile 1, because I have just been so deep in the weeds on Path of Exile 2, and to be perfectly honest, at this point, I still don't enjoy that game very much. It's just, it's been a slog, and now it's time for fun. So, I will see you on Friday, Exiles, and have a good one.